2019, British evolutionary psychology researcher and adjunct anthropology professor Edward Dutton wrote yet another brilliant work on a taboo subject. His book, Race Differences in Ethnocentrism, analyzes racial distinctions in the tendency to elevate ethnic in-groups while denigrating foreign out-groups. Professor Dutton, who teaches at the University of Oulu in Finland, begins by distinguishing between positive and negative ethnocentrism. The former can be defined as having pride in one's own group, with an emotional will to make sacrifices for it, while in the latter, distinct prejudices, even open hostility, become manifest towards members of other ethnic groups. The purpose of his research was to explain why some races are more ethnocentric than others, and why contemporary Europeans display such relatively low levels of this natural defensive instinct. Professor Dutton divides humans into 4 basic races: Sub-Saharan African, Caucasian, East Asian, and South Asian, although he recognizes that this does not include every ethnic group, particularly native populations in the Western Hemisphere. South Asian in this context also includes some Middle Eastern and North African populations, based on the genetic similarity between them. He took data from the World Values Survey, with positive ethnocentrism determined by the percentage of persons stating that they would fight and die for their nation, combined with those who were simply proud of their nationality. Negative ethnocentrism was estimated based on how many of those polled would not want someone of a different race or an immigrant as their neighbor. The results found that negative ethnocentrism was highest among South Asians, followed by East Asians, then Caucasians and Africans. Positive ethnocentrism was more evenly distributed among Africans, Caucasians and East Asians, but highest among South Asians. Professor Dutton explains that South Asians stand out in both respects due to the high degree of in-family and cousin marriages among Muslims. About 1 in 4 Indian Muslims are married to relatives who are second cousins or closer, while 55% of British Pakistanis are the product of these marriages. Such reproductive trends have less variation in their genetic pools, and according to the theory of genetic similarity, this causes a high degree of behavioral relatedness, which further predicts a greater magnitude of attachment to the ethnic group. The theory correctly asserts that working for the benefit of others having similar genetic material helps pass on one's own genes, and humans have evolved social constructs to do just this. Another reason for high ethnocentrism among South Asians is religion. Professor Dutton describes several ways in which it promotes ethnocentrism, and especially so if there is a god concerned with morality or group purity. Members of such religious groups believe that the lives of their cohort have eternal significance, inspiring a willingness to act for the benefit of the group, even when this requires substantial sacrifice. Furthermore, they also believe that their own behavior is judged by a god who distinctly prefers their group over all others, which further intensifies their in-group cooperation. Religion can also encourage negative ethnocentrism if it casts out groups as damned or impure. Professor Dutton repeatedly draws upon the concept of life history strategy, also known as RK selection theory, according to which animal populations, including all human groups, have developed differing reproductive strategies in response to disparate environments. Some animals produce many offspring with multiple partners, but invest little or no effort in caring for the progeny. This is often an adaptation to an unstable, dangerous environment, in which quantity is the optimum course for genetic survival. In more stable environments, however, it is generally more advantageous to produce fewer offspring, while an investment in time and nurturing ensures continuance of the group. These traits are now commonly recognized as being the basis in explaining how human IQ developed so dissimilarly around the globe. In lieu of this, our selected peoples are categorized as possessing a fast life history, while those who are K-selected have a slow life history. Among human beings, for example, Sub-Saharan Africans undergo a fast life history when generally compared to Europeans and South Asians, with Northeast Asians being the slowest. Peoples with a fast life history mature more rapidly, but are also more impulsive and aggressive, these being adaptations to historically chaotic environments. Such people are less inclined to trust or cooperate with others, whether among co-ethnics or outsiders. Slow life history strategists, by contrast, are discernibly more cooperative and trusting, showing a greater control over their impulses. According to Professor Dutton, a fast life history is associated with negative ethnocentrism, while a slow life history is associated with positive ethnocentrism. However, not all of the data bear this out. Studies show that young Afro-Americans are higher in negative ethnocentrism than young whites, while data shows Africans in Africa being similar to American whites in both positive and negative ethnocentrism. The low negative ethnocentrism has yet to be explained, but the low positive ethnocentrism is likely due to the recent history of African nations. Their borders were drawn up by colonial powers, not by Africans, and these superimposed countries contained multiple ethnic groups that had almost no shared national and, in some cases, genetic identity. As a result, many Africans are more likely to identify with a group smaller than the nation, such as a tribe or clan. Thus, Africans likely own a stronger sense of group pride than the data indicate, because the survey questions were about the willingness to fight for one's country, not one's tribe. One of the most interesting factors correlated with ethnocentrism is the average age of a population, with younger cohorts having higher national pride. Research has shown that age is an outstanding factor that predicts positive ethnocentrism. However, Professor Dutton speculates that this may be due to other factors related to average age. High birth rates and low life expectancy obviously result in low average age, and these are often found in low IQ, high poverty societies. Such social environments create stressors, which tend to increase positive ethnocentrism. Countries with the highest average age are overwhelmingly white, with the exception of Japan and Hong Kong, while the youngest are African and Middle Eastern. The median age in Gaza, for example, is about 17 years, far lower than the world average of 30 and the EU average of 43. And there are at least 4 African countries with a median age of 15, populations from whom millions will soon be seeking refuge in Europe. Finally, Professor Dutton attempts to explain the relatively low ethnocentrism of Europeans. One theory is that they have an evolutionary strategy based on producing geniuses and exceptional individuals, popular figures who made breakthroughs to advance the interests of the ethnic group. But the sort of environments which produce and support such people are of low conformity. This ultimately decreases ethnocentrism. He also argues that the social changes connected with the Industrial Revolution have meant far less natural selection in Western populations since 1800, enabling harmful mutations while promoting domesticated, deracinated traits, and the mass consumer culture fostered thereafter by the political and commercial elites has only reinforced this genetic trend. Professor Dutton argues that ethnocentrism benefits groups in the struggle for survival, and therefore, natural selection has generally promoted it, whereas maladaptive attitudes, such as low ethnocentrism, are the product of negative mutations. Mental and physical abnormalities due to genetic weakening are often found together, so that as the population is increasingly burdened by such mutations, the ethnocentrism in society is greatly reduced, thereby minimizing its chances for long-term survival. And although Professor Dutton's book does not cover such subject matter, one can extrapolate from these findings the ominous situation that awaits Western civilization in the upcoming century. With the social coup by the liberal political elite after it had overthrown the old European order between 1870 and 1945, the most dominant strains in the European gene pool were eradicated in just a few generations, amongst which were certainly those most resilient traits that embodied the tendency towards higher ethnocentrism, lost forever in a series of deliberate, catastrophic wars. And on that final note, we can consider Professor Dutton's research in a more qualified light. More ethnocentric groups tend to outcompete less ethnocentric ones, no matter the IQ levels nor the material support given. Europeans' low ethnocentrism, then, is a menacing disadvantage, and it is simply ethnic genocide to allow vast numbers of people possessing higher ethnocentrism into their nations as migrants. However, Professor Dutton expects that European groups will become increasingly ethnocentric in the coming decades, but only after they are subject to the acute stresses of a declining society in which foreign populations gain more social and political power. If anything, this shall be a wake-up call for Europeans everywhere, and hopefully, one that will forever define us.